Hey guys, it's your host, Bailey Cartwright. Welcome to the Stronger Scars podcast, where I invite others to dive deep into the ups and downs of physical and mental scars. Hello everyone, welcome back to this week's episode. I haven't recorded in 3 weeks, so I apologize, but we are back and we have a really great guest. So today I'm joined with Andie Aldave, and we went to Notre Dame together for 4 years. She was on the lacrosse team. She was an absolute stud. And then she finished her lacrosse career with a 5th year at UNC, where she won a national championship. So super excited to have you here. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit better than that, go right ahead.
You did a pretty good job, but thanks for having me, Bailey. I'm really excited. I actually have my Stronger Scars t-shirt on under this. I've been a big fan, but also have had a lot of teammates kind of go through injuries, and myself included. So I thought that was really cool when you started that at Notre Dame, and we kind of all rallied around that. But yeah, did 4 years at Notre Dame, played women's lacrosse there, and then transferred to UNC for my 5th year, where we just won a national championship. So that was really cool, really awesome, and such a great experience. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm still here. My parents still live here as well. And then I'll be going back to UNC this year to be a grad assistant and finish up my grad degree. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to start. Let's take it way back to when you were growing up and playing lacrosse. I was just telling Andie how I don't know much about lacrosse at all. It wasn't like a very big thing by where I lived. So, kind of just talk about like growing up playing lacrosse. Like, when do lacrosse players get recruited? Like, kind of how was all of that? Your high school years and a little bit lower.
Yeah. Lacrosse has always been a massive part of my life. Growing up in Baltimore, it's definitely one of the hotbeds for lacrosse, the East Coast in general. But my mom played in college. My two older sisters played in college. So I was always around the game and kind of grew up with a stick in my hand. And I always give my sisters credit for, making me such a good player because I always played with them growing up. But yeah, it was like the thing to do. And honestly, looking back, it probably absorbed a lot more of my childhood than it probably should have. But I feel like everyone who kind of plays a college sport these days, I mean, I say that now, but now looking at kids, it's getting even crazier. So I feel like I'm grateful for like the relaxed kind of childhood I had with lacrosse. But um, yeah, I got recruited to a high school in Owings Mills, Maryland for lacrosse actually, and they were kind of a powerhouse at the time. And then I never lost a high school lacrosse game, and we won 4 high school championships, and that was kind of when they were in the midst of their kind of huge, undefeated. Like we won 9 national championships in a row. If you Google it, it's called the
Okay,
McDonough School.
pause. Got recruited to play in high school.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So you were like what, 14?
Like, yeah, like whatever 8th grade is, I don't even know.
So was it close to your house?
Not really. So the way like so there's obviously public schools and then like private high schools, and they both have like very distinct lacrosse like districts, I would say. Like they don't ever really play each other. So the private schools around here are very competitive in high school lacrosse. So at the time, like I would have probably gone to a public high school, but my 2 older sisters went to a different private high school that was probably like 45 minutes away, and they like loved it. So my parents got like a good experience with that. And then once they kind of reached out, it wasn't the same high school, but McDonough, when they reached out, I like went and visited, and like the school was like awesome, and academically it was like kind of like I related to Notre Dame in a sense. Like it definitely prepared me for college. But that was crazy, and like I was like, whoa, like at such a young age. And then to kind of go there was like a dream because I had always like looked up to those players, and
Right.
they were like awesome college players too. Um, but yeah, so that was crazy. But I had such a great experience there and got to play with like some of the best players in the country. that moved on, like I said, and were, top players in Division 1. Um, so yeah, very involved with lacrosse, like growing up, and that was a huge part of my life. Um, but I also played like other sports too, like basketball and field hockey, which was like so great for me. And I think like that really helped me kind of find a joy for lacrosse. And like it wasn't something that I was like exhausted by the time I got to college because I had played 2 other sports, which again I think is going away. But yeah, lacrosse has been and always will be a huge part of my life.
Well, I was watching an interview, like I creep on my guests, this is what I do. But I was watching this video and you were saying how you were late, like you were one of the later people to commit to college, but then you were like, it was my sophomore year. And I was like, what? Like, so is that, I know the rules have changed for soccer, like you
Hmm.
can't talk until later now, but was that truly like a late commitment for you?
Yeah, which is crazy. The recruiting process for lacrosse when we were kind of like being recruited was like off the charts insane. You could really commit whenever. That could have been 8th grade, like freshman year, sophomore year. It was really crazy. I mean, now it's like September 1 of your junior year. You can't, that's the first time you can come in contact. But I remember like girls on my club team, which club was like the way to get recruited pretty much. It wasn't through high school, but um, committed my freshman year, and I hadn't even like finished a freshman year, full
Yeah.
year of like classes, and I'm like the most indecisive person. So like my parents were like, "Oh God, like
Yeah.
what do we have on our plate?" But yeah, like a lot of my really good friends committed to like top D1 schools my freshman year, and I personally was like, I want to see everything, and like was very like I need choices and I need to kind of expand my horizons. And Notre Dame was actually my last visit, which is
Oh,
crazy. That was my sophomore year. But like if I had never kind of taken the time, I definitely would have never committed there. But yeah, it is that was crazy to even think about. And I was at a camp actually this week and I was on like a college athlete panel and I was pretty much saying that that was late and parents like looked at me like I was crazy, but like in the at that time everyone was like, what is this top recruit doing like committing so late? But yeah, the recruiting process was definitely crazy, but I love Notre Dame and I wouldn't change my decision for the world.
yeah. That's like, it's so interesting keeping on the recruiting topic. I remember
Hmm.
I committed my sophomore fall as well. And I was like on the very early end of things. Like none of my teammates really committed at that point. And what we noticed is like the girls, there was a big majority of us who committed then. And then so many of them either changed their mind or they went to their freshman
Hmm.
year and then ended up transferring. So I think it's interesting that like a lot of times making a quick decision that sounds good on paper maybe isn't the best thing for you. So,
Yeah.
I think all those rule changes are kind of interesting and probably for the better.
For sure.
Like when I'm sorry, if you can't drive yet, should you really be making a decision where to go to college?
Right, probably not.
Well, I want to talk about because I remember when we were going in to freshman year and like summer school, and like I remember seeing all these things about Andie Aldave being the #1 recruit for lacrosse, and I remember the magazine with your
Oh my god, yeah.
yeah with you on the cover of it. So what was that like? Like being to make sure I get this right, you were the #1 recruit.
Yes, I was in my class, yep.
What was that like?
Honestly, like, I didn't really know about that until I got to campus, which kinda like, was I was just like, like, I'm just not a huge I don't really care about the social media stuff, and I've always been that way. And I remember like one of my friends sent it to me while I was on campus, and I was like, "Oh my god, like this is just like, like I know my classmates are seeing this. Like now, I'm just kind of like, I, I don't know. That was just like kind of hard, but it was cool. Like I guess like I had earned the respect of
And
like
you
the
worked for it.
lacrosse. Yeah, and like not that I necessarily needed that, but I think the one thing that I took away with of that was it was kind of putting Notre Dame women's lacrosse like on the map. Not that they weren't already, but our recruiting class that year was really strong, and I think like because we were like kind of the head of the, whatever that magazine was, or at the time, like that made me feel good that I was like, taking my talent somewhere that like we could do something different or do something that a program had never done before. So I feel like it was less about like, at least me personally, like I wasn't really thinking about it in like a me um perspective, but more of like this is really cool for Notre Dame and like our team. So yeah, but that was definitely tough, like showing up to campus and people being like, "Oh my god, like what's up the number one recruit?" I definitely got like crapped on a little bit for that,
Yeah.
but it was cool. Like you said, like I, had worked my butt off like in high school, so to kind of see that, that had kind of paid off, and I had a lot more work to do though when I got to school. So
Yeah, I mean, I was always curious, like, did that come with added pressure? Did you feel like you had to always be on your A game, like with regards to like playing, but then like also just like you said, like your teammates are seeing it and like sending it to you and making jokes about it. Like, I just imagine that would kind of be hard to like have the spotlight on you and like have to live up to the hype.
oh my god, yeah, for sure. I think I definitely am very hard on myself, or was. I've given myself a lot of grace getting older, but yeah, my freshman year we had a really young team, so the pressure to kind of like perform, and a lot of us got earned starting roles that spring, our freshman year spring, was really hard. And just trying to keep like our team afloat, and that year we didn't make the NCAA tournament, so that was like very hard for us. But I think like in the end it made me grow up a lot faster than I think I ever imagined. My freshman year we all took on like very big roles, so I think from then on honestly like my job got a lot easier, leadership wise and just playing wise. So again, I wouldn't really change how that freshman year went for me, because I think as much pressure as I put on myself, um, it definitely pushed me and grew me into a better player, leader, friend, and teammate. But yeah, definitely the expectations were there, and you definitely had to try to live up to them. I think like as time went on, I definitely forgot about that even was a thing. Honestly, I'm laughing that you brought that up because I don't even like, I'm sure my parents have the magazine somewhere, but I literally don't even remember that. So it's just funny. Like it was definitely cool in the moment, but I think it does add a lot of like, especially now social media has become wild, like covering our sport and kids coming out of high school. So I think like my year, it was just they always did that, but it became like even magnified more. Um, so yeah, again, I think as cool as it was definitely there was a hint of pressure there for sure.
I know I like soccer. I guess growing up, I thought soccer was like a bigger deal than it is. People don't ever care about soccer, but I'm like scrolling on my TikTok for you page and I see lacrosse highlights from like this random college game. I'm like, I can't believe like how it's a big sport.
Hmm.
I didn't.
Yeah, it's growing like crazy. The amount of college programs like now for Division 1 are has probably doubled since I was like a little kid, and the coaching positions are, I mean, like every day there's a new assistant job or new head coaching job, or people are hiring different people. I mean, it's wild and it's awesome for the sport, and it's really cool to see because when I was younger, like you couldn't even watch a women's lacrosse game on TV, and now it's like we're on ESPN, like the Final Four is on ESPN. So it's definitely come a long way and it's really cool to see, but it's a lot.
So I think, somebody who might be listening and like doesn't know much about lacrosse and how the season works. So kind of walk us through. So like for soccer, for example, like our season's in the fall and then we have our off season in the spring. But for you
Mhm.
guys, I always thought it was really interesting how you got that off season when you first get to campus and then you have your season in the spring. So what does that fall kind of look like for you guys? And, like, and then you have to wait around and like, do you have to come back from Christmas break early to start your season? So kind of just walk us through what that looked like.
Yeah. So when fall ball kind of starts in like August, September, so you kind of get to school and it's pretty laid back, honestly, which I think is really nice to, especially if you're a freshman, to get adjusted to school classes. But yeah, it's definitely like an angsty period because you get there and you don't really have much to do, and the season just seems extremely far away, which like it is realistically. So fall is a lot of running, a lot of lifting, shorter practices because we aren't in those like 20-hour weeks. It's a lot of shorter weeks, and fall's grueling for sure. I would say it's one of the tougher parts of being a college lacrosse player, and that's universal, both like women's and men's. And then so you'll get like a fall break, and then you'll come back, and that's kind of when you play like most of your like scrimmages against like local teams or just like regional teams, and then you'll go for home for Christmas break, which is kind of like your last little hoorah at home until you're at school for what, like 4 or 5 months in a row if you're like making it to postseason. So we would usually come back to school early before classes start to kind of get practices rolling, and then really you have like a couple weeks in January, and then season starts like usually first or second week of February, and then you're going all the way through. Like this year, we went from February all the way until Memorial Day weekend. So definitely a really long season. But like you said, it's kind of cool and different that we get to kind of play past like school ending in a sense if you're making it past postseason. But it is a really long year because when you get there in the beginning, there's a lot of like excitement and kind of like jitters. You have a new team every year, but it's a long process the whole year to finally get to season. And then once you're in season, like it's a grind.
Right. I've always been jealous that you guys get to go to football games.
That was definitely the perk.
That has to be a highlight. That has to be a recruiting
Oh
point.
my god, yeah. As tough as like fall is, like we had so much fun because it really is like where your team bonds, like the going out and at Notre Dame, the football games, like we would literally practice early in the mornings just so we could go to the football games and the tailgates like later in the day. But like you said, that's like the trade-off of like your different seasons and whatnot. But then like come spring, like we don't get a spring break and we're just in like straight up lockdown mode. But yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious. So, like, I think, I mean, you're not going to brag yourself up, which is fine. But, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum here. Like, you were the star player on your team, whether you're going to say you were or not. Like, your name was everywhere. You were successful. And, that's something you should be proud of. On the
Mhm.
other hand, I was someone who didn't really get to play. So I think it's so interesting. I come on here a lot and talk about my experience, but I'm just kind of curious what it was like for you to go and be so successful. I think, that's good for people to hear what that experience was like for you.
Oh my god, yeah. I I guess I didn't really expect to. I definitely held myself to a high standard, like growing up and wanting to be the best. And I think like if you don't say you want to be the best, then like you probably won't be. So, I always wanted to be the best when I got to college and kind of just thrive in anything I did on the field. And it was really cool. I mean, like looking back, my 4-year career at Notre Dame, like it was it was so cool. I mean, I think, like you said, not everyone gets to start every game. Not everyone gets to score a goal or assist a goal, and I think like or hold records. I mean, that's been something that I look back now. I guess like probably wasn't as like jaw dropping in the moment for me because I was kind of like, okay, like just always trying to elevate my game and get better. But I think like more recently I've been looking back and just being like, damn, like that's so cool that I did that and was really proud of myself to kind of, I think, especially walk away from Notre Dame knowing that I did everything I could on the field, injuries aside and whatnot. But yeah, and I think I had really great people around me at the time. Nicole Massimino, who was my roommate. She's been on this before because she has a million plus scars. But I think like having someone like her, or just like people like good friends in general, to kind of remind you of your successes in the moment when I'm like being hard on myself or whatnot, definitely like reminds me that I did like incredible things and a lot of things that like people will never do in their time at being a college lacrosse player or even playing at Notre Dame.
I love hearing you talk about yourself because like I think growing up, like anytime someone would like hype themselves up and just be like, my hard work paid off,
Mhm.
we would shit on them because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's hockey or whatever. But the older I get and the more mature I get, I realize like it's okay to like be proud of ourselves. It's good to be proud of ourselves. And like when we really do work hard for something, we should
Mhm.
celebrate that.
100%. And I think, like, I've definitely got better at that, especially when you have, like, reporters asking you whatever X, Y, and Z after games, and, like, as much as I'm like, I credit all this to my teammates, like, there's at one point you gotta be like, "Yeah, like, that was my athleticism," or, like, "That was my, like, IQ that I used," and I honestly, I had 2 older sisters that played in college, both at a very high Division I level, at Hopkins and University of Florida, and they didn't they didn't start all their 4 years, and they weren't the star players of their teams, and, my parents had been through that, so to kind of be that, like, kind of like that thing that, like, my parents and sisters are really proud of, and they, like, gas me up like no other. I mean, like, my own fan club, you should have seen them at the Final Four this year, like, fatheads and whatever, but it's really cool to see that, like,
Right.
they're so proud of me, but, again, I think it it really does, like, start in yourself, like, as much as your teammates and your family support you, like, it's gotta come from you, and at one point, you have to recognize yourself in the whole process.
Right. 100%. So what I've gathered is you are the draw queen. Is that correct? That's what it's
Yes.
called? That's when you're doing like
That
the face off, right?
Yep. That's
Okay.
what, like,
Is that
starts
what
every game.
the record's in that you broke?
Yes, that's at Notre Dame. I think it's, like, single season, draws in a single season, and then I think it's all time, like, draw controls maybe? I think there's, like, 2 of them, but you probably know Barb Sullivan.
Yes, I do.
She held both of those before me, so that was, like, really cool to kind of, I know, sad, but really cool because it's, like, it's Barb and
Ginger
she's
power.
Ginger power, yeah. So that was really cool, and she was
Yeah.
always, like, super supportive, but, yeah, it's funny because at this year at UNC, I, like, barely took the draw, so that was definitely, like, a shift for me, but, it was honestly relaxing because I was like, "Now I can just focus on one part of my game and not have to be, like, all over the place," but, yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely
It
something
it's
cool.
very intense. Walk us through what the draw looks like because people may be like, what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah, so it starts every game. It's like you and the person from the other team, and then there's a big circle, and it's like right at the 50-yard line. And there's 3 people from each team. 2 pairs are on the outside of the circle, and then the 1 pair in the middle. And your sticks are basically together, and the ball like sits in the middle of it. And it sounds crazy me explaining it. It's like, what is this? But the whole like I guess, like, part of it is you try to get the ball in your stick and, like, scoop it out pretty much to, like, where you can self draw it, so, like, in your, like, kind of bubble really quickly, and that's how, like, people get a ton of draw controls. The better you get at it, the easier it is to kind of pop it up and get it to yourself, but I could write a book about this, which maybe I should, but, it's honestly has gotten crazier and crazier. Now there's, like, a certain stick you use to take the draw, and then you'll trade it with, like, someone else for your real stick because the pockets are different, the stringing and, like, the plastic, it's, like, a whole thing. Um, but, yeah, so that's what I did at Notre Dame and broke records in, but it's pretty wild and it's getting crazier, honestly.
Hey,
We had like
are you
go
like
ahead.
talking on each other when you're in there?
I
So
don't
close to them.
like you're probably like we use like a lot of calls to like talk to each other about like where it's going or like whatnot, but it's like really physical, especially because there's only like 3 people from each team and like the rest of the people on the field until there's like actual control of the ball,
Uh,
they can't come over like the lines. There's like restraining lines. So it's like a bloodbath for like until someone gets control of the ball and then it's like a free for all from there. But yeah, it's definitely evolved and gotten crazier, but super fun and was really cool to kind of see how it changed over my 4 years at Notre Dame.
yeah. So what was it like when you like Like, how did you not end up doing it at UNC? Like, does someone else just kind of their go-to or?
Yeah, they had a girl my year, Ali Mastriani was, like, so good at it, and she was, like, one of the best. She was my year, so we would always take it
Yeah.
against each other, and then there was a younger girl too, but I was, like, technically on the draw team, and I actually took it, crazy in our Final Four game. We were down by, like, 7 or 8, and they put me on the draw to win some, but, yeah, I mean, like, I was always an option for them, but that was, like, honestly really cool for me to be a part of, and just kind of, like, bring in what I learned, and everyone has, like, different tactics and whatnot, so, um, yeah, that was super cool, but again, like I said, it was kind of relaxing to let someone else do it and kind of be like, "Okay, like, I'm here if you need me," sort of deal.
That was Is it the same in guys? Because isn't that what Charlie did?
Yes, he did the face off. It's similar. They
What?
just, like, they're, like, on the ground versus, like, we're up in the air.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that sounds so fun. I love, like, the intensity of that.
Yeah, really cool.
Um, all right. Well, obviously, we gotta talk about injury. So
Yeah.
give us the lowdown.
Um, okay, so before college, I never really dealt with, like, severe injury or, like, injury that made me kind of sidelined or out for a certain period of time, but my junior year fall, I had, like, a funky knee in my knee, and, like, went through a few rehabs, nothing was really working. So they were like, "Okay, the best way to figure out what's going on is if we go in there and actually see it ourselves." So I had a scope done my junior year, which was honestly not crazy. Like, scopes are, I feel like, very easy to come back from. But I was just kind of pushing the timeline of, like, getting back for season, and I had it done really late in the fall, so that was kind of tricky. But honestly, not wasn't a huge deal. Went into junior year feeling great, and then COVID year happened, which was crappy. But again, it gave me time to kind of heal, which was awesome. And then senior year was kind of the big blow. Was great through fall ball. Came back preseason, probably feeling the best I had felt. And then first game of the season, I hyperextended my knee, fractured my tibia, and it was just a mess. So that was kind of the injury that I had dealt with that whole year. It was just my knee was swollen. It was pretty much a horrible bone bruise. I was stuck in a knee brace, which I give mad props to people that play in braces because it's not as easy as maybe the doctors or your trainers tell you it's going to be. Um, but yeah, it's honestly a crazy story now thinking about it. That injury happened the first game, and then our team hit, like, a big COVID outbreak that, like, 3-4 week period, so we missed, like, probably 4 games, I wanna say. So I, like, rested like crazy, rehabbed like hell. They shoved me in a brace, and I was actually, like, never missed a game with it. Um, and they kinda just put me in for draws, like I was talking about earlier, so that at least that was, like, one thing I could keep doing, that didn't really require a ton of, like, physical exertion. But I was rehabbing that whole season, and it's really hard to rehab, like, off season, but to do it in season when you're trying to play and you're trying to be a huge contribution to your team and a captain and a leader, and you're just, like, physically a mess, and then mentally you're probably even more of a mess, which I was. um, it was a lot, and then to deal with, like, trying to do stuff after practice or whatever, and I'm, like, hobbling on one knee practically. It was definitely hard, and I think definitely took a toll on me, like, overall, because I was just, like, freaking exhausted after everything because I was just, like, trying to give, like, any day I had, like, the 20%, I was, like, trying to give it all. But as you know, it's like at one point you're gonna crash and burn. And luckily for me that I didn't literally crash and burn, but I think it opened my eyes to a lot of things of, like, my time at Notre Dame, and just, like, I don't know, just wanting a new experience. And I think injury kind of does that to you. It definitely, like, on the sidelines, it makes you think a lot more about, like, where you are, what you want to do with your time. than just like physically being healthy, and you don't really have the time to think about that stuff.
Right. I think a lot of times when people come on here and talk, I hear a lot of freshman year injuries, and
Hmm.
that's really hard. That was like when my journey started, and it's hard because
Yeah.
you're new to a place, you don't really know anyone. It's the first time being away from your sport, but I
Hmm.
think, equally so, like getting through 3 years of being successful and not being hurt to end your time somewhere with an injury had to have been really, really hard.
Oh my God, yeah. And it was like, because like up until that point, like you said, I was a first team All American like every season. And like my stats were like on a projection up. And then like my senior year was just like a straight line down. Like there was this one game actually. My sister posted it on her Instagram as like a funny like end of the year this year after we won. But there was literally a graphic during a game, and it was like the struggling star, and it had my stats from every year. This is ESPN, so people out there. But it had my like freshman year stats, my sophomore year stats, junior year COVID was obviously weird because we ended midway, and then it had my senior year stats that were like horrible because like I was hobbling on one leg. Like if you knew the injury at the time, like if you were on my team, like you would, everyone knew, whatever. But I was like, it was just crazy, and, like, obviously, I laughed at that, but, like, again, then I'm, like, kind of putting pressure on myself, like, "Shit, like, I am not performing to, like, who I was," but I'm like, I have to give myself grace, like, I'm injured right now, I have a fractured leg, like, um but yeah, that was, like, pretty hard on me. I think because I had, like, huge, plans in my head and ideas of, like, having a huge senior season, like, wanting to win a national championship, and then when something, like, paralyzes you to an extent of, like, you can't really control it, it's really hard.
What was it like on the hush to the public? Because I know like a lot of times when like your big player gets hurt, you don't really tell people. So like you said, your team knew, but like did other people not really understand?
I think, like, well, the leg brace gave it away because I was, like,
That's
in that. But, like, the injury, I think, itself was pretty hush hush, like, people thought, like, I was, like, playing on a torn ACL or, like, whatever, so, honestly, I think there were some teams, like, didn't even think I was gonna play some games, and then I showed up and was on the field, but, um yeah, but I think, like, I don't think a lot of people knew to the extent, like, even when I was in the transfer portal, coaches are like, "So are you healthy? Like, do you have to get surgery? Like, what's the deal?" And I, like, would have to do this whole, like, clarification story, but, yeah, it was pretty, like, on the down low, but I think, like, once people found out, like, what I was playing through, they were like, "Holy shit, like, how did you even do that?" But I think, like, in the moment, like, I wanted to do it for my team, and I don't really think I needed to prove it to myself, but I think, like you said, like, it's your senior year, it was just like, I wanted to be a part of that, and as much as I had my 3 years before that, and I think being, like, a big leader for my team at the time, like, I definitely put that pressure on myself of, like, I need to be out there for them and at least be, if I'm not scoring or if I'm not putting up the points, at least being that, like, emotional sorta leader that they needed.
Well, speaking of pressure, one of the questions I have is, do you feel pressured from like your coaches or your teammates, trainers, whoever it may be, to get back and play? Like you were saying how you were just like so drained and you were exhausted and you didn't feel good, but you pushed through it. And I think that speaks to you as a person and an athlete. But at the same
Mhm.
time, did you feel pressured by like those external factors?
Honestly, no. The sports med at Notre Dame, or at least like our trainer, was like, at
Right.
any time you don't want to play, like you let me know, and or if you don't, whatever, want to practice. And even my coaches too, like they knew I was tired, and like she could tell like days I was like really trying to just like grind through it. So no, I definitely didn't receive any pressure from, that side of things. I mean, of course, my parents were like, "We just wanna see you play, and, like, we wanna see you happy," and, yeah, I think probably the pressure just came from myself, but of, like, wanting to be out there, but again, like, without the COVID year, like, that was, like if I didn't have that, that was, like, all I had left, so I was, like and again, like, didn't know I was transferring at the time, but, like, I was just like, you never know what you can wake up to the next day, so, personally, I was just like, "Let's do this thing," like, as weak or strong as I am, I'm ready to go.
That's funny you bring that up. I did like a online speaking event yesterday for Stronger Scars, and like I was giving takeaways at the end. And I was saying how you never know when it could be your last, like your last
Mhm.
game, your last whatever you're doing in your life. Like it doesn't even have to be sports, but like looking back and knowing you didn't give 100% is a really crappy feeling. So like
Yeah.
so worth it to push yourself to know that you left everything that you physically have and mentally have out there.
Mhm. For sure, and I think that's how I, like, walked away from Notre Dame being like I think if I didn't play that my senior season, I definitely would have felt different, but like you said, I think, like, my cup was full. I was like, I gave everything I had this year, and I was exhausted after it, but it was worth every minute, like, every training room session, every the hours I spent in there my senior year was, like, absurd, but it was worth it, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Right. So let's talk about mental health because I love
Yeah,
mental health.
me too.
I It's interesting to me. I think again going back to social media and just like I mean like I didn't really talk to you much. We didn't really like we didn't have
Mhm.
much in common like class wise and stuff. And
Yeah.
to me as an outsider, it always seemed like you had everything together. And that's just kind of the reality. But I probably seemed to a lot, well, maybe not. I didn't really um, but yeah, I'm just like kind of curious, like what it was truly like for you, because making a persona about somebody doesn't mean it's true.
Right. Um, yeah, I would say well, definitely started using the, like, I don't even know what the proper word like, mental health services or, like, sports psych,
Honestly.
at Notre Dame maybe my, like, junior, senior year, because I was, like my trainer at the time, Brad, who God bless his soul.
Good. Good.
I still talk to him this day, but he was like, "Have you ever thought of like talking to someone else about like your feelings or like how you're truly feeling about this? Because like you're sitting here sobbing and clearly there's like other things going on." I'm like, you know what, Brad, that might be a good idea. Um, but before that, like I had never really had like mental health issues or like injury, like I said, which I think is kind of can be the kickstarter for a lot of these things. But um, yeah, I think my senior year I was like in there a lot, just because it was like unknown territory for me, and I think I almost felt like too old kind of to like be doing that whole thing because like there were freshmen on our team that had ACLs or like so I think like there's a I don't know, there's sort of like a you picture like just younger kids being injured and like that like they need to go through all of that, but I'm like, there are like half our team was like upperclassmen and injured. And I think like you forget you have to treat yourself the same way as you would walking into your freshman year. Um, but yeah, I think I was a mess and I definitely worked on my mental health game a ton, which I think that senior season, like my second half, was such a huge change, like just a shift of like, not even that I was necessarily like producing for the team because, like I said, they were getting pretty limited production out of me that year, but um, like I just felt better, which for me was definitely huge. And like talking to someone about, my mind, like what I was taking myself through during the game. And I had this huge thing on my leg and like what that brought with it. And when I picked it up and strapped it on, like it brought me back like PTSD of like injuring myself again or I'm slow, I'm not who I used to be. So definitely working on a ton of that. And I kind of did that my entire senior year. Um, and honestly, when I stopped wearing my brace, which was last summer, like after lacrosse was done, and I was doing some stuff for the US team at the time, like I had never felt better. Like, I felt like I literally, like, took off, like, 20 pounds of myself and just felt free. Um, but yeah, I think it's again, like, mental health is talked about, I think, in a better light than it has been in the past. I think we definitely need to work on it, but I think in lacrosse specifically, like, they are doing a lot of stuff to kind of rally around mental health, and there's like things like Morgan's message and even you, that are kind of bringing awareness to players and that it's okay to not be okay. And that was something I had to learn, that it wasn't okay to be okay. And even though people might see you in this light of like, oh, the number one recruit and she's a first team All American. Like, everyone kind of has their struggles, and you don't really know that until you actually talk to someone about it.
Yeah. And I think one of the best things for like breaking the stigma is for people like yourself to open up and talk about it, because like I loved what Notre Dame was doing and what place like universities are doing, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it just kind of feels like they're checking a box and
Hmm.
we're saying we're breaking the stigma, but are we? And
Right.
that's why I just feel like sharing the raw story of somebody goes deeper, because it's not checking a box. It's giving a space and a place for people to talk. And I don't know, to me, like more can always be done for mental health and we are on the right direction. But,
Hmm.
at the same time, like it has to be an authentic progression. It can't just be getting things done because it looks good on paper.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that that's something it's funny because like at Notre Dame, I think our team started to get really good at being vulnerable with each other and like sharing when we weren't okay. And like and you knew our team, like we were crazy, but like we were real with each other and very
Right.
truthful and honest about how we were feeling. And I think that's something my team now at UNC is working on. Like the whole like mental health part of it, or just like sitting down and having conversations with each other about how we're genuinely feeling, because I think at your especially at UNC where you're held at a very high standard, like performance wise, and you're at a university that's cranking in national championships and conference championships, and it can be a lot on yourself. So I think that's been cool for me to kind of go from a place where we were really good at it to a place where like it can definitely be worked on. And I think we got better at it towards the end of the year. And I definitely think that helped us eventually win a national championship, which is really cool. But it's interesting to see like how every school kind of does it differently, every team does it differently. And even like the coaching staffs too.
Right. Yeah. And I think you going in and being like the grad assistant will be really helpful with that.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that. We actually like this at the end of this year, they started Morgan's message actually at UNC, which was cool. But we had a couple girls like super passionate about it. And I think like for us, like fall is a time where we have not a ton of time on our hands, but we have time to kind of do stuff like outside of practice and whatever. So that'll be like really cool to get involved with that next year and just keep an eye out for those people that are interested and kind of want to make a change in the team.
So I have one more Notre Dame question before we talk about transferring. But this has been something I've always been curious about. Like for those on the outside listening, like the lacrosse team was a cult. Like you guys were tight. Like there's honestly no way around it. You guys were so tight. You always had fun together. You loved each other. Like I'm sure there was drama going on, but like you guys like we were all jealous that we didn't have that. I mean, let's be real, my team wasn't quite the same. And I just like where did that root from? Like how did you guys keep that? Like how did you guys actually bond so well and genuinely like love each other?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think I thought about that a lot this year, especially like not being a part of the team. And then just again, you compare your experiences. But um, I think the one really cool thing is that our team, like we maybe have one or two local kids that are from like Chicago, but the rest of us are like East Coast, West Coast, and you're like smack in the middle of the Midwest. And you really don't have time to go home, and not a lot of parents can come out. Um, So I think like we really bonded in that like we were each other's family, and we really like took that to heart. And I think that's something the coaching staff does a really good job of preaching, like we're family here and that atmosphere. And I know that's like cheesy to say, but like it really was like
Yeah.
the older girls took care of the younger girls, and we would go over to their houses, and people that lived on campus, like the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, like we would do dining hall together. Like it was just always together. And I think that was really cool to kind of grow up in a program like that and just like learn the ways of like when I was a senior, like everyone got in a car and everyone was driven to wherever they needed to be. Or, just helping each other out and stuff like that. But I think also there was a piece of our team that, as much as we loved lacrosse and we're super uber competitive in that, like we knew that outside of that, we needed to keep a healthy balance of like having fun, because we knew if we weren't having fun, then on the field was just going to be a nightmare and a mess. And not necessarily like lacrosse was my outlet, like was going out my outlet too, sure. But like there are people that it's vice versa. So um, I think we did like a really good job of having a healthy balance of both always. And there was always a group of people that like were either wanting to have lacrosse as their outlet or going to dinner or something like that. So again, like not that these are generic responses, but I think all of these things like we really took to heart. And I think that's why our culture was so strong, and we never had like the hierarchy like BS. Like you walked into the locker room and you were treated the same regardless if you were a captain or a freshman that could kick their ass on the field. Like I thought that was so cool, and that's how I was treated. And I know there was definitely a culture shift I guess entering my freshman year. Um of when that really started to become a thing. And I think our class like really embraced that, and the the class above us as well. And I feel like we were kind of like the pioneers of like making our culture like what it is today, because we were so close with each other, and we still are. Like those are still some of my best friends that I talk to even though I transferred, and the girls above me too. So it's really cool to see. And I think like it was funny, like, we had ACCs out there this year, in South Bend, actually. Um, so that was, like it was definitely, like I just looked at their sidelines and I was like, "Yeah," like, people are always like, "They're wild and they're crazy and they're so obnoxious," but I was like, "Yeah, like, those are my girls." Like, I, like, know what it's like to, like, be in that. And it's just a different experience, I think, when you go to school, like, so far away from home where it's not, like, a car ride back. Like, you really bond with your teammates more than more than you think you ever would.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was always envious of you guys because I mean, you were a standard of how a team should be and how a team should treat
Mhm.
each other, and not all teams had the same experience, so
Yeah. Well,
um,
thank you. That's so sweet.
okay, I wanna transition and talk about your transfer because, going from one really good lacrosse team to a really great lacrosse team, what was that like? What was that process kind of like for you? And I know, obviously Notre Dame and UNC are in the same conference, like they're rivals. That had to have been a very interesting transition for you.
Yeah. So I mean, what is today? Actually, like around this time last year, or maybe a little bit earlier, I put my name in the transfer portal after a ton of like talking to myself and my parents. And just like I just want a new experience, like school wise, lacrosse wise. And honestly, I put my name in like not knowing anything, hadn't talked to anyone. It was just like put it in and see what happens. Um, and definitely had like outreach from a couple schools that I had like had in mind, and then like wild ones I had never heard of before. But it was a really cool process to kind of go through again, having the experience I did and aging since I was recruited last, which was such a young age. Um, but honestly, when UNC reached out, I was like in awe. I just like didn't think, not that I could never play at their level, but I just like didn't know at that time I was still technically injured and didn't
Right.
have a great season. So I was just like, why do you want me? kind of. But um the head coach, Jenny Levy, is like awesome. Like so cool, and just I look up to her in more ways than not. But she was just like, "We'd love to have you. Like, if you can, like, what programs are you interested in? We have awesome programs you can pick from." And then like the one I ended up picking, sport administration, like it was definitely a really quick process. Like I had to take the GRE, which I hadn't studied for. I was doing all these applications and just like on my computer for hours and hours a day, and really didn't end up getting into school until like a week before I moved was supposed to like move in. Um, so that was just like wild. But I met like one of my best friends through the transfer process, Sam, who was my roommate this past year. She transferred from Richmond actually, and she was looking for a roommate and was like, "Let's like, do you have a place to live?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Let's just room together." So we did that, and that was like super cool. Um, but yeah, it was definitely kind of like I was like shell shocked when I got to campus a little bit, not in terms of like the school, but the lacrosse was just so competitive. And I had always been in a competitive environment of lacrosse, like growing up in high school, and then obviously Notre Dame too. But like they are like freak athletes, and like I call myself very athletic, but like I was like woof, like struggling a little bit. And I had to kind of find a new gear that I hadn't had in a while, especially after being injured and everything. So the fall was like huge for me. Like I worked my ass off in the summer, coming back from like taking my brace off, and even like over breaks, because I was like, I have like a lot of work to do to catch up to them, like speed wise. And just like it was easy for me though, because like mentally I was there and had always been there throughout my time at Notre Dame. So like the practices and like the IQ piece of it came very easy for me, which I feel like is almost the hardest part. But like physically and like the strength and conditioning piece, I was like, I had to find a new gear, and I was probably in the best shape of my life, honestly, this year, training with them. But yeah, that it was very different, kind of comparing the two in the moment. But honestly, it was something really cool to be a part of, and to say I kind of went from like 4 years, like you said, like it was awesome lacrosse, and we were competitive and we competed in the ACC, and we went to the Elite Eight, to kind of being like, I played for the number one team in the country. We went undefeated in the ACC. We went undefeated the whole year and won a national championship. Like, not many people can say that. And I feel so lucky and grateful to have the transfer experience that I did. As many as like it came with a lot of bumps, bruises, and it was never easy. I pretty much went in there with like a blank slate of like, they knew who I was, but like at the end of the day, I was coming in there trying to win a spot, and I felt like a freshman again. So it was definitely really hard, but one of the most like rewarding processes I think I'll ever have in my life.
Do you think this is something I've thought about like before? I wonder if people who transfer deal with is, would you have been as happy if you guys didn't have a successful season, if you didn't win a national championship? Because I think a lot of time people transfer and the place they're going to isn't successful, and it's like, did
Hmm.
they make the right decision then? So would you still have been happy with your decision?
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually talking to like my mom and like my parents, just my family. They like texted me. My mom texted me, who's like, she was like, "Are you happy? Like, are you like doing what you love, whatever?" But it was we had an away game, and they were like home watching it on TV, and she just texted me and was like, "You just look so much happier, and like you can just see it, and like the way you're playing, like the way you're interacting." And so I think for me it was like what I needed at the time, just like a new experience. I got to meet so many people. I got to start like a whole new program of like something I want to do post lacrosse. And um it again, it was just so good for me. And again, I think regardless of whether or not we won or lost the national championship, I think I would have walked away feeling the same of like, I that was the best thing for me. And I made the right decision, even though it was like the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I feel like kind of going back to how close your team was at Notre Dame, that had to been hard to tell them until, a lot of them stayed for their fifth year, right?
Yeah. That was definitely one of my more like darker days, I would say. Like I think the first thing is like you say you're transferring, you put your name in the transfer portal and you have that conversation with the coaches, which isn't easy either. But I think like telling some of my like best friends that I had 100% planned on coming back to Notre Dame for my 5th year. So had an apartment and everything. So
Oh, wow.
to kind of blindside them a little bit, like hurt. It was hurt. It hurt me a ton. Like
Yeah.
I was just so sad. And so yeah, that was definitely really hard. And I think that's something that goes like underrated throughout the transfer process because like people don't see or like that's not talked about. It's like where you're gonna go or where you're leaving from, but it's like the group of people you leave behind that like you've like I said have been like family with the past 4 years is like super hard.
So I'm kind of curious. Promise this is my last deep question, but
Yeah.
um since you were like, you had really good friends, and I know with your injury, like your lacrosse final season didn't go as planned there, but what was it that really made you realize you had to switch up, you had to do something to change how you were feeling? What was it that really made you want to make that transfer?
Yeah. I a lot of people like ask this and I think like the answer is always like, oh, like a new academic and athletic experience. But um I think like and not that that's a lie because that's like truly what I wanted. Um but I think like I when I graduated and left school and like came home for those like couple weeks where like you have like the thinking period of like I just graduated now I'm like about to go back for another year. Like I guess I left Notre Dame, like, before I left, I was just, like, I remember me and Nicole Massimino, like, walked the stairs, you can walk them after you graduate, and I think it's, like, I just, like, felt so satisfied and, like, fulfilled of, like, my Notre Dame experience, and, like, coming back, like, wasn't gonna be doing it with, like, Nicole, like, my best friend, or, like, the people I had been there with, like, it was just, like, everything was gonna be so different and not necessarily that that's a bad thing, like, I was completely bought into, like, coming back for a 5th year, but I think at the end, I was just like, "Yeah, like, I, like, can walk away, like, saying I did it all, like, I'm good kind of," and I think that was, like took me a while to kind of get my brain to be like, "Yeah, like, you can check, 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 like, you did it all, and, like, you just graduated, and you did your 4 years like you said you were going to," and that definitely was like really that was like the last piece of like I could be a double domer. Like that was kind of hard for me because I was just like I feel like I felt like I had more to give, but like deep down I was just like I do have another year of lacrosse in me, but like it would be so cool to do it somewhere else and I feel like I am fully capable of that. So I felt like I kind of closed the book on my Notre Dame experience and in a perfect way. And again, not necessarily how I wanted to. Like, no one wants to finish the year injured or, losing in the Elite Eight. But I think for me, like, that was good for me.
Yeah. Well, I love Notre Dame, obviously. I had the same experience. I was good as well, and it's an amazing
Yeah.
place. But
Hmm.
you made the right decision, I think, because you won a first national championship. So
Yeah.
what was that like? Like the confetti, like the pictures, like come on, what was that?
Uh, I get chills. Like I literally do. It was like every person dreams of that, right? Like that's like you peak when you win a national championship and it's like the pinnacle of college sports and it was like so like I started crying like happy tears because I was just like holy crap like just like looking around and like seeing everyone in the t-shirts and the hats and like the Carolina blue confetti like it was just so cool to be like a like this is how I ended my college career and B like I finally freaking did it like and it took so long for me to get to that point and the amount of work and like tears and hard decisions and like it took everything in me to kind of get to that point. It was just like I was like sobbing out like everything that had built up to that moment, but like hands down one of the best moments of my life and it didn't come easy and it's just really cool when you do it with people that you're already like I have some of my best friends that I barely met a month ago and like now that like we will forever be linked by like winning the national championship, and that team and like the coaching staff is just so cool. And like you don't really realize it. And I feel like I'm still kind of in like an awe thing. Like we just got our jerseys that we get to like have framed, and it has like the patch on them, and it's just surreal. Like I just never thought I would actually do it. And there's so few people that can say they won a national championship, but that also like allows me to close the book of like, okay, now I'm good again. But yeah, it's definitely like nice to kind of walk away from college being like, okay, like I don't have to top that. Like
Right.
that was the top of it.
You
So
did it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what's next for Andie Aldave?
Ooh, well, I'm gonna grad assistant next year at UNC, so that'll be really cool to kind of dip my toes into coaching, and I'll get to do a little bit of like director of ops work, which is awesome. And I think just being around the girls and the team again to see kind of where they go after this amazing, incredible year. So I'm sure it'll be hard. But outside of lacrosse, I've always wanted to work in like pro sports, like at a management level, or I don't know, just like I've always just been so like passionate about sports, whether it's like NHL, NFL, like MLB or something like that. I've always just been super passionate about that. So hopefully finding a career in that if I'm not glued to the lacrosse world for the rest of my life. But I'll definitely like miss it and miss playing. But um, yeah, I mean the real world is on the horizon,
Yes.
which is fun and cool. But yeah, it'll be fun, and I'm excited to kind of use my experiences, which has been a lot, and and my degrees, use my degrees to the real world because now I have two of them.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I am really excited for people to hear this. I feel like it's just like, I don't know, it's really cool to hear people who, like you've been at the top and you've had struggles too. And that's, what we should talk about more. So thank you for coming on and just being honest and vulnerable with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun and so cool. And you are doing an awesome job with like creating an atmosphere for people to be vulnerable. And I see your stuff all the time, and even like seeing friends repost like stronger stars. I'm like, oh my God, I know her. So you're doing an awesome job. But this was so fun. So thanks for having me.